Merry meet, Annie here. Welcome back to Tarot Together. This video is going to be about Arthur E. Waite because this series is focused on the Rider-Waite tarot cards. The next video is going to be about Pamela Colman Smith, and then the video after that will be about the various appearances of the Rider-Waite deck. So, why am I starting? And you'll find this is a bit of a detailed video on Waite himself, because when we handle the decks that he and Pamela created, we're holding them. We become partnered with them. His symbolism becomes ours. Her symbolism, as revealed in her artwork, becomes ours. It's important not to sit with strangers when it comes to this, as far as I'm concerned. One of the reasons I am so fascinated with the Rider-Waite deck is there are personalities and people and history behind it that I appreciate. So, let's introduce you via this picture to the young Arthur E. Waite. Waite was born in Brooklyn in 1857 to an American father and an English mother. But his father died not long after his death, and his mother took the family back to England. After she delivered the child she was carrying when his father died, she didn't have a welcome reception from her family in England because there had been a separation from them when she became involved with his father, and because she never married his father. They never accepted that. So when she returned to England, it was a struggle making her own way. So he grew up in a home with limited means. As part of her, I guess we could say, rebellion against the judgment her family had passed upon her, she converted to Catholicism. So it was very much a part of his younger years. And while he didn't stay true to that the length of his life, what it did, and he did acknowledge it, gave him a love for ceremony and ritual and the way mysticism could be expressed. It's why we see a lot of its influence in his interpretation of the cards. Waite became a prolific writer of all kinds of things, but he eventually got to where, from what I'm reading after his researching and writing about the ceremonial magician Eliphas Levi, he started taking on esoteric and occult subjects as his subjects, his area of expertise to research and write about. In fact, his first major publication was a treatise he did on Eliphas Levi. He came to see himself as a chronicler of all things esoteric and occult, an expert on the subject matter. And he also liked delving into the history of those practices. So while not officially, he considered himself to be an historian. When he moved away from the Catholic Church, he spent time with the spiritualist movement and became a member of the Theosophical Society for a while, although in the end he had a big rift with them because they had a tendency to be very anti-Christian. It wasn't settling with his worldview of the time. The thing is, he saw all paths as a way to explore, to get to the source and understanding of the Godhead. So he didn't eliminate the possibility of considering anything. In fact, he was quite sure that at the root of all religious archetypes and teachings, at their purest essence, when you got down to that, when you shrunk all of those experiences down to the purest essence, you would get to the place at which you would have the greatest understanding of what God might be. He believed in studying the practices of many traditions and paths as a way to not only get down to that root of what God might be, but also as a way to conceive of and become one with the flow forward in that relationship to mystery and the divine. In 1891, he and his wife-to-be were initiated into the neophyte grade of the Golden Dawn. But he was a bit of an erratic attendee, although he kept at it, and he studied, and he made his way through the neophyte grade. Over time, it seems, in bits and pieces along the way. Right from the beginning, he was kind of butting heads on a regular basis with S.L. McGregor Matthews, one of the founders of the Golden Dawn tradition. They just didn't see eye to eye on things. Regardless of that, he still made progress in his studies, sporadic as it was for a while there. He left and returned to the order several times during a period of time, but he still managed to keep progressing through its degree system. The first time we can see something that would give us insight into his consideration of the power of the tarot, when he published a book on cartomancy, the power of working with the tarot. It's a moment in time that was rather important because it was one of the first books in English written on the tarot. 10 years after that, he decided to continue within the Golden Dawn, entering the second order, having come out of his neophyte training. But it was a rather interesting time within the Golden Dawn, as especially that second degree system was beginning to break down. There was a lot of disagreement within the order of what that would be and what the order would be, and what the focus, the belief, and the practice of the order would be. And in that time, even though he was taking it very seriously and going for a second degree, he began to also explore Freemasonry. And by all signs, it appears he stayed involved with, at varying levels, Freemasonry until the end of his life. But back to the Golden Dawn. He's writing out a time of turmoil with the Golden Dawn, and there's a big schism within it, with those who preferred the teachings and the suggestions of S.L. McGregor Matthews, splitting off to go with him. Another group splitting off to follow Waite. Waite named his group the Order of the Independent and Rectified Right, thinking he was righting all the wrongs he'd seen in the original order. What it came down to in the schism where those two things were created was Matthews was still aligned to the practice of ceremonial magic, making things happen, where Waite had become of the mind that it was more about mysticism, about a spiritual journey, an exploration into mystery, touching on the Godhead. It wasn't about what you did. You weren't making things happen in the universe. You were living a mystical life. So two very different approaches to what the Golden Dawn might be. No matter how enthusiastic Waite was about the group, his splinter group out of the Golden Dawn, it frittered away in about 11 years' time. But he still didn't give up. He created yet a new order, this one, the Fellowship of the Rosy Cross. In this one he was that much more emphatic that the fellowship was about mysticism. It was not about magic. In fact, he stated in their constitution that they were on a quest for grace, not a quest for power. Well, in time, the Fellowship of the Rosy Cross also disintegrated. So we see in his maturing years and into his middle age, his alignment to the Catholic Church and the experiences there, spiritualism, theosophy, the Golden Dawn, and his version of the Golden Dawn, and then very specifically the Fellowship of the Rosy Cross, and his belief in the practice, the quest for grace instead of power. So why do I mention those things? Well, it's interesting insight into the man. I don't know from the things I've read if I would like this man. He was quite full of himself, very confident, and was quite sure others would be convinced to believe as he did. He never saw himself as wrong in any way. But the importance of all of those experiences, oh, and I forgot to mention the importance of his Freemasonry, blended in with all those other things. Embodied in the tarot, as he envisioned it, a quest for grace, for understanding, for touching on the face of mystery, an avenue to explore what God might be, how the spiritual, how the influence of the divine could be experienced in the physical realm. All those experiences that he had with all those societies and orders informed what he came to understand, that the experiences of living, exploring them fully, were avenues to exploring the divine. All those experiences he had taught him that so many cultures, so many religions, everything from alchemy to numerology to astrology, and the various bits and pieces of spirituality from many sources that are combined into the tarot. He wasn't somebody who thought it was strange that all those bits and pieces could be combined to be something. Remember, his focus was, he was quite sure, the key to mystery lie within all of those things, that by exploring them deeply, we got back to some core essence that they would all share and where our great learning would come from. And many of those practices celebrated that experiencing of living fully was the way that one became a truly spiritual person. Life as an opportunity to experience the divine and aspire to align with it. Waite called his tarot, the one that he designed, the rectified tarot. He seems to have liked that word, remember? The independent and rectified order, he referred to his tarot as the rectified tarot. Yeah. Again, his ego and his personality comes into it. He collected the information he could on the tarot. He was aware of the history of the tarot to a certain extent. Collected a lot of information, was inspired by two decks in particular. We'll touch on that when we get to the video on the many versions of the Waite deck. But he was really good at pointing out the errors in all those systems and coming up with what he was quite sure was the appropriate way to interpret the tarot. Gotta give him credit for that. A man of his convictions. We wouldn't have his deck if he wasn't quite sure about it. The rectified deck, correcting all the misconceptions and errors that he saw amongst his peers in the Golden Dawn and in his time, who were beginning to bring forth concepts of what the tarot might be, including their own decks. He blazed his way forward, aligned to his idea of what it would mean. This deck came out in 1909, 1910, and it was an immediate hit, and remained so since then. This is what he wrote about his deck. Keep in mind, it's an insight into understanding the man, understanding why the images and the colors and the symbols on the deck as we have it in hand now. When talking about his deck, he said, "It will be thought that I am acting strangely in concerning myself at this day with what appears at first sight and simply a well-known method of fortune-telling. He didn't believe in fortune-telling. It's not what he saw as the purpose for the tarot. It goes back to why I shared so much about his history. His lifelong devotion to the concept of grace over power, reflected in how he saw the tarot. This is also from him. The true tarot is symbolism. It speaks no other language and offers no other signs. The tarot embodies symbolical presentations of universal ideas behind which lie all the implicits of the human mind. And it is in this sense that they contain secret doctrine, which is the realization by the few of truths embedded in the consciousness of all. That's what we need to know about Arthur E. Waite. What he saw as a purpose for the cards. Universal truths. Getting at the essence of what is and why is. A journey, an exploration. A life exploration, a spiritual exploration. An exploration of mystery. A touch on the face of God. That's why it's important to know the man behind the deck. He thought that the purpose of symbolism, coming to understand it and explore it, was to elevate one's consciousness. His split from the Golden Dawn, illustrative of his idea that magic and the working of magic detracted from the true purpose of one's spiritual journey, is implicit in his deck. He saw the great ritual of life as the rite of transformation of the individual. Tarot as the mystical journey, not as fortune-telling, not as magic, but as a mystical journey. That doesn't mean that others throughout time with this deck and with others haven't used it for purposes of divination and magical practice. I certainly have, and I'm sure most readers have found themselves called there. But the importance of understanding a little bit about this man is to understand what he saw in the deck. He died in 1942. A lot of conversations that we could have had with him would have been fascinating ones. Like I said, I'm quite sure I wouldn't have liked the man, but I would have respected his definitive worldview and his belief in the importance of mysticism and exploration and daring to journey and venture and explore and discover what life's purpose might be, what God might be. The balance to his presence in the deck that we hold in our hands is the presence of Pamela Coleman Smith. Equally important, the softening of the cards, where empathy and emotion and imagination and possibility are introduced in a new way. If the Waite deck, and I do believe it is in great part focused on the concepts of polarity, of balance, the balance of male and female, of above and below, of past and future. It's also about the balance of the man who saw it as a tool to personal transformation. And the woman, its illustrator, who saw the poetry behind that. Our next video will honor Pamela Coleman Smith. But for this video, I hope you feel, if you were not familiar, a little bit introduced to Arthur E. Waite. As always, your comments on this video are welcomed below and in our Facebook group, the links at the end of this video and in the text block below. And as always, keep in mind what I've just shared with you. It's how the man came to be known, as I would read bits and pieces about him here and there. I don't feel emotionally connected to him, but I see his points and I take them well. You might know more about him. You might know some different or conflicting information to what I shared. That's what the discussion's all about. Please feel free to comment. May part.